stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
And Phil here on GB News. And we've got a cracking show lined up for you today.
We'll be speaking to an A&E consultant who's got a 6-point plan to fix the crisis in our hospitals.
Isn't it good to have some positive solutions rather than negative news? And we'll be speaking to a Church of England rector who has criticised the church commissioners for a £100 million reparation fund for its role in the slave trade when it hasn't got enough money for its own parishes.
And in a week that the government confirmed it's consulting on compulsory labelling of halal and kosher meat, we'll be speaking to a Muslim former faith advisors to the government about it.
But the opinions we really want to hear are yours. So do email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before all of that, here's the latest headlines with Ray.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has described the execution of a British-Iranian national in Iran as barbaric. Rishi Sunak said the killing of Ali Reza Akbari was a callous and cowardly act. Mr Akbari was sentenced to death on charges of spying for Britain. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has summoned the Iranian chargé d'affaires to make clear the government's disgust. A union representing ambulance workers has written to the Prime Minister saying they feel betrayed by attempts to paint them as uncaring. GMB, which represents more than 10,000 ambulance staff, told Rishi Sunak he was demonising them over strike action. It comes after Mr Sunak told the Commons that industrial action was terrifying the public. Well, nursing strikes have been paused in Scotland after talks between First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Royal College of Nursing. Negotiations will now continue next week with the aim of reaching a deal by the end of February. The Scottish Government is also pledging to match any NHS pay increase in England if it's higher. RCN General Secretary Pat Cullen credits pressure from nurses as being key to negotiations moving forward. Rishi Sunak is reportedly sending a squadron of tanks to help Ukraine take back territory lost to Russian forces. According to the Sun newspaper, the Prime Minister will tell President Zelensky today that the army will immediately supply 4 Challenger 2 battle tanks, with 8 more to follow. The decision makes the UK the first Western power to supply main battle tanks to the country. Plans to house 400 asylum seekers in a small village near Northampton have now been dropped by the Home Office. Residents had objected to using the 17th century Highgate House Hotel in Cretan, which has a population of just 520. Opposition to the plans had been led by Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris. James Hill is the chairman of Cretan Parish Council. He told us why residents were against that scheme.
We're a village of 520 people, and the prospect of 400 people coming to live here without occupation or activities to keep them occupied, without proper access to local services, we felt that was unsustainable for us as a community and also for the local area.
Police cordons have been lifted at the site of a fatal dog attack in Surrey. The Caterham beauty spot was closed off on Thursday after a 28-year-old woman was attacked while walking several dogs. Paramedics were unable to save her and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Specialist teams had been carrying out forensic work as part of an investigation by Surrey Police. No arrests have been made so far. The government says single-use plastic plates, trays and cutlery will be banned in England from October in a bid to curb the impact of plastic on the environment. At the moment, England uses around 2.7 billion pieces of single-use cutlery per year, and only 10% is recycled. Repeated breaches of the new legislation could lead to retailers and food vendors facing criminal charges. Dr. Christian Dunn, a senior lecturer in natural sciences at Bangor University, told us why the ban is necessary.
Plastic doesn't break down, doesn't decompose, doesn't rot away. And what happens to it is it breaks up into smaller and smaller pieces of plastics, which then become microplastics or even nanoplastics. And now what we're seeing is those plastics are so small and they're being found everywhere. They're in the rain, they're in the air that we're breathing in, they're even in our blood.
And at least 9 people have died after 5 tornadoes tore through the southeastern United States. In Alabama, the death toll is expected to rise as rescue teams search for survivors. The twisters have destroyed homes and tens of thousands are now without power. Alabama's governor is urging President Biden to declare a state of emergency. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Ray. To look through the papers with us this morning, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by London Assembly member Sean Bailey. Sean, thank you for joining us.
Morning. Great to be here.
What's caught your eye?
What's caught my eye is in the Telegraph talking about £11 billion windfall coming to the Treasury because the UK economy has unexpectedly grown. We've grown by just 0.1%, but the prediction was that we'd shrink by 0.2%. And with the drop in borrowing and energy prices coming down, this all adds up to £11 billion windfall for the Treasury. My hope is it manifests itself as a tax cut sooner rather than later, but it does actually mean that we can look at it slightly differently, because my belief is that lots of people have been talking the UK into a recession for political reasons, but in the background, people are still attending work. The labour market is held up, and our businesses are still working and trying to keep the country ahead of the game, and I really appreciate that work.
So this could be the year that the UK finances improve a bit. If energy prices come down and the government don't need to subsidise energy bills to the same extent and things, there might be some room for some tax cuts. You think?
I really do. I think the first thing to accept is it's still a tough environment. People are still struggling. Businesses are still teetering on the edge. There's a £5 billion package to help business with energy. That, I believe, is still going ahead. But the cost of energy in the wholesale markets is coming down. Let's see if it manifests itself in our bills. But it does mean that the government have more wiggle room than they were predicted.
But the good news is, isn't it, all of that negative talk at the time, all of this Liz Truss in that mini-budget collapse the economy, people are now saying, oh, it wasn't as bad as we thought, oh, this didn't have those effects that they thought. And I think we need to chant up the country rather than talking it down.
I also saw in one of the papers today that the bonds that the Bank of England bought during the Liz Truss premiership have now been sold off at a profit.
Yeah.
And it's actually made £4 billion
so they've made money
for the Treasury by buying those.
Right.
First thing to say, the bankers always win.
Lesson one in life.
But we'll be speaking to Justin Urquhart-Stewart later on in the show, talking about what the prospects are for the economy. So we'll see whether he's as optimistic as you are.
One point
Sean.
I saw the pharmaceutical industry hadn't done as well. That was one of the companies in sectors not doing as well. And I want to know why. Surely they've had a bumper couple of years. Phil?
Anyway, the story that caught my eye this week was a survey which was done, an opinion poll, asking people about whether or not they'd pay more tax for the NHS and how much more tax they'd be prepared to pay. Now, historically, this has always shown quite a high number. Now, people might not always have then gone and voted for it in a secret ballot, but they've always said to an opinion poll, so they're prepared to pay more tax. So in 2017, the King's Fund reported 61% said that they'd support tax rises. In 2019, 67% said that they support higher taxes for NHS spending, according to an Ipsos Mori poll. But not now. This current poll said that 43% of people said that they were not prepared to pay any more tax at all for the NHS. 20% said they were prepared to pay an extra £1 to £50 a year. And 14% said that they were prepared to pay an extra £51 to £100 a year. Only 10% of people said that they were prepared to pay over £500 a year. And I thought this was really interesting, why there was this change. Now, I didn't know whether it was because people felt they were paying enough tax as it is, got the highest burden of taxation in history, or whether they felt the problems of the NHS were no longer about money, but about waste, bureaucracy, inefficiency, etc., etc., and that they needed to get their own house in order before they could just keep coming back and asking for more and more money. But I thought it was interesting, particularly in conjunction with the front page of the Eye today, where Wes Streeting is saying that the NHS is run too much for the doctors rather than the patients. Now, I got into terrible trouble.
I was going to say that. Philip said that about a week or two ago. Absolutely lampooned online.
Yeah, I said that to a constituent last week and got absolutely no end of abuse, particularly from Labour Party members in my constituency.
Yeah, but you know what they do? If you send a letter back now, everybody posts it online, so everybody sees it on Twitter, and this is
so I'm going to see what response they make to Wes Streeting saying it.
None of this surprises me. I think there's two big things here. Firstly, the NHS gets some 140 billion a year, and people are beginning to ask, what exactly are we getting? And with all of the strikes, I think the nurses have the public on their side, but other elements of the NHS don't, because people are like, well, we give you 140 billion and you're not looking after health. The pandemic, people are saying, well, how comes we're protecting you? I thought you were meant to protect us. That's the first thing, but I think there's a bigger thing about public services. People have heard so much for so long about how great and how valuable public services are, but they've also witnessed that with the downturn in the economy, people who work in the NHS, and particularly the civil service, have been taken away from the reality of having to have a pay cut, but people in the private sector have had their pay slashed. And I think people are now seeing it's not the government versus the NHS or public service, it's the people. And are they getting the service they're paying for? I think this is a feeling and a story that will run, and it will go beyond the NHS.
I totally agree there. Now, I was looking at a story in the papers, in many of the papers this week, and this is about the 50-year-olds who've left the workplace for many sort of reasons, out of maybe choice, out of maybe health implications. And during COVID, what we saw is that, like, 650,000 people or thereabouts leaving the workplace. So the government is saying, how do we get people back into to the workplace. And one of them was, there's a good side and a bad side to this possible solution. One of it was, well, let's reduce their tax burden. Why don't we give these people to get them back in the workplace, the over 50s? Maybe they don't pay tax for 6 months, maybe they don't pay tax for a year. Now, first of all, I don't agree with that, because what about all the people who are over 50s who stayed in the workplace, who you're going to be working side by side with, and you, for doing the right thing, will not get that tax reduction? But the important thing to note is that people do want a tax reduction. They're seeing it as a positive thing to get people back in the workforce. We need to understand people need to keep more of their own money, otherwise they say it's not worth it.
Look, there's two sets of people who left the workforce. There's those who earn so little so they could afford to leave because they're not losing much, and those who earn so much that they could afford to leave because they have so much. And the government needs to address that. And let's be clear, if you have jobs in the workplace, try to fill it with young people first.
Sean, you stay with us, because now we're going to welcome the former political correspondent for Sky for his take on the political week. So, hello, Peter Spencer. So tell us, first week back after recess, we've had Prime Minister's questions. Both of the leaders have given speeches. What was your take on the week?
Well, actually, when you talk about both the leaders, I mean, they come across rather as the terrible twins, really, because first of all, we had both the main party leaders making their big New Year speeches at the same place at practically the same time. And now they've both been trotting off to Scotland and Northern Ireland, again, sort of following one another's footsteps, which is rather sweet in its way. But nonetheless, it's interesting to note when you look at the two of them that they're both clever, dedicated, committed, hard-working people who are clearly honest and decent, and they also both happen to be, I think it's probably fair to say, that they wouldn't thank me for saying, but not very good at the charisma thing. And so also, I think it's fair to say that Sunak is fairly sort of centrist, and so is Starmer. So it's pretty hard to spot the difference between them. But when it comes to
saying that, it sounds like that, therefore, is going to be a battle to the end. There's no point saying one could be ahead of the other in the polls if they're so similar.
Well, indeed so. I mean, but looking at it more broadly, I would say that most governments have a shelf life of up to 10 years or so. Well, the Tories have had 12. We've had a pretty rotten deal for one reason or another, like COVID, like the increased costs thanks to the barbarity in Ukraine, and so on. And I detect a sense, which is reflected, of course, in the polls, that people just fancy a change.
What's your biggest story from the week then, Peter? What's caught your eye in particular this week?
Well, I mean, it's been very bitty, but to me, my headline for the magazine for which I write is Shifting Sands, and it's not something that's been declaimed, but what we seem to be looking at is the government learning the hard way that politics is, after all, the art of the possible. And I look at stuff that they're sort of vaguely sort of putting out, letting it be known that, and so on. That, for example, with the railway workers, maybe they won't be quite so strident about cuts to the workforce, driver-only trains and so on. And with the nurses, that may be a one-off payment, and maybe a little bit of sort of, we're looking at sort of bringing forward next year's payment. And then that's partly because, of course, that as was just been pointed out, that the nurses very much have the public on their side. And also when it comes to the railway workers, although the biggest union, the RMT, doesn't actually pay strike pay, these guys are still sticking out. And so there is only a matter of time before the public turn around and say, "Oi, you're the government, fix it, right?"
Peter Spencer, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We very much appreciate it.
But Peter said a very interesting thing there, shifting sands. Is that now what happens when you basically negotiate in public? It's no negotiation behind closed door now. Everybody knows what you're doing, so you have to have that shifting sands.
I think there's two things. I think the nurse and the train drivers are in very different places. People have an affinity for nurses that they don't have for train drivers. And, of course, train drivers earn so much money. It's a much harder sell. And I think the PR around the RMT is slightly different to the nurses union, but it is shifting sands. And I think one of the things that the current set of politicians haven't quite gotten hold of is there is no such thing as a private negotiation. Between FOIs, leaks and Twitter, that's over. And I think the unions understood that more quickly.
Sean, stay with us. We'll have you back here at 11 o'clock. Now, the NHS is experiencing one of the worst periods of crisis in its history as waiting times for vital services like A&E and ambulances soar.
A&E consultant Professor Rob Galloway joins us now to share his thoughts on the crisis and what could be done to improve the situation. Professor Galloway, thank you for taking the time to join us. You've got a 6-point plan, as I see it, in order to improve the problems in A&E that you're experiencing at the moment. I just thought we might spend a bit of time going through them in turn, if we might.
And can I just say that it's good to have solutions on the programme, so I'm glad that we've got your 6-point plan rather than hearing everything that's going wrong.
So the first one, Professor Galloway, is to unblock the beds by using hotels and bringing back the Nightingale hospitals manned by people from the Army and volunteers. Do you want to just tell us why that's so important to somebody on the front line?
Yeah, so I wrote this piece for the Mail because I'm so concerned about what's going on. We need to understand that this isn't just busy or the NHS is under pressure. This is a crisis. We are seeing up to 500 people die unnecessarily a week. And there's been really good studies which have shown for every 82 patients who wait more than 6 to 8 hours in A&E, an extra patient dies. And that's how the Royal College of Emergency Medicine have calculated and been accepted by statisticians throughout the country that up to 500 people are dying a week. And if there was 2 plane crashes, there'll be emergency COBRA meetings. So we need to do something to solve this crisis of social care and NHS care being played out in the A&E departments. And so one of the immediate things we need to do is allow patients to leave the A&E departments. The reason they don't leave the A&E is because there's no hospital wall beds for them to go to. So we see patients up and down the country. These are taxpayers who've paid their taxes all their life to expect the care they will get. And now they're waiting in trolleys for up to 24 hours in a corridor and then waiting 2 to 3 days in a cubicle even before they start getting onto a hospital wall bed. And there are up to 15% of patients who are medically fit for discharge. And they can't be discharged because there are no community facilities there, a combination of community care and social care. And that's the real crisis. And we've got to do things differently. Nightingale hospitals, for example, was set up, but it was the wrong idea because it was about hospitals and you had to have the doctors and nurses. And we don't have enough doctors and nurses to run extra hospitals. What we can do is get extra carers in, and that could be from the military, that could be employing people, could be changing immigration rules.
Dr. Rob, we're trying to get through all 6 points. So we've got that one, so we need to unblock that.
I think we can all agree, and I think we can all agree with that one. The second one was to cancel non-urgent surgery. Can you tell us what it is you want to cancel?
Yeah. No, I don't want to cancel any surgery. In the articles, it's about postpone the least important surgery. It's the least worst option. These options are awful in terms of postponing anybody's operation. Nobody wants any operations to wait.
But what do you have in mind? What sort of things do you have in mind?
What do you have in mind?
Well, for example, if you've got... OK, so apologies, the line's really... I can only hear your echo, so it's really poor, the line, apologies. So there are some non-urgent operations which could be delayed to allow the staff to deal with emergencies. Now, this is not a long-term or a medium-term solution. This is the things that hospitals have been doing anyway the last couple of weeks when our numbers of patients were really critical. But this isn't a long-term solution at all. What we need to do is move on to the medium-term solutions. And that is about staffing, really.
But what is a non-urgent surgery, in your opinion? Are we talking hip replacements? I mean, what are you describing as a non-urgent surgery? That's what I'm trying to get to.
So things like hip operations, gallbladder removals, now these should be done urgently. These should be done within 6 weeks. But we're in a crisis at the moment. I see the complications of delayed surgeries. And if you have a look, over the last 12 years, the waiting lists have gone up and up and up. And we are seeing the complications of those delayed surgery. And I do not want to see surgery delayed, but we've got a crisis at the moment, and it's a small part.
Prioritisation is the word, yeah.
Okay.
So the next one, suspend official inspections by the Care Quality Commission. That's what you've said there.
So again, these are not medium-term solutions. This is what to do in the next couple of weeks. We need the staff's priority to be about looking after patient care. And the CQC is the right thing to do to inspect hospitals and to make sure that the staff and the managers are doing the right thing. But the immediate crisis, we've got up and down the country, up to 30 patients in a corridor, and everybody's expertise and concentration needs to be about that. And so that's why I talked about suspending things like that, and also non-urgent training, non-clinical patient-facing training, such as about information governance. That type of thing can wait till after this crisis. We're in a crisis and we need to concentrate about patients.
To obviously help the A&E and cut down people going there is encourage people to get vaccinated. So you're going to stop people going into A&E. How are you going to do that, and what are they getting vaccinated for?
So the COVID vaccine is incredibly controversial, but the risks of COVID have been statistically and medically been proven to be much, much higher. The risks of COVID are incredibly high compared to the very, very, very small risks of the COVID vaccine. And so we are seeing the increasing mortality that you're seeing in the nation is much higher in those unvaccinated. Also, the risks of flu are much higher if you haven't been vaccinated. So a vaccination program is a sensible measure when we've got increasing numbers of flu and COVID coming to hospital. But just about the flu and the COVID, these are the straw
Dr.
which
Rob,
is breaking the...
We've got two more to get through. We've got two more to get through.
Just for completeness, Professor Garrow, I'm sorry, but we are limited for time. Let pharmacists prescribe, which I think many people would also support, and declare a critical incident to bring in the army and things like that. The question I guess I've got on the whole piece is that in none of those 6-point plan, is there any responsibility that you're putting to the NHS for any of the problems it's facing? There's nothing there where it says the NHS needs to do better. Is that really the case?
So the NHS needs to improve. And at the moment, it is under pressure from COVID and flu, but they are the straw which has broken the camel's back of the last 12 years of what's been going on. We've had previously a 6% increase in funding. Historically, the last 12 years it's only been 2%, and that hasn't caught up with the increase in the ageing population. We've got massive problems of a lack of staff. We've got half the number of hospital beds per 1,000 population compared to Germany. We need our politicians to take control because it is a government agency, the NHS, and we need to take control. And it is a crisis. There is 500 people a week dying unnecessarily
Rob Galloway, thank you for joining us today.
We'd love to speak to you again at more length, but obviously, as you appreciate, time's limited. But thank you for coming on with your 6-point plan. And as Esther said, we do appreciate you actually coming with some proposed solutions. It's very much appreciated.
That's just an immediate thing. The longer-term solutions are outside this. It's about staffing and investment.
OK. Thanks very much indeed. And I think
it's always about more money.
No, but the thing is, they've had a 40% increase in money since 2010. There's more now, doctors and nurses, than ever before per patient. So when you said, but what are we going to do to change it to get greater value for money? We've got to do that. But anyway, coming up, we will hear from the MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, about his thoughts on the NHS, particularly in regards to the exodus of junior doctors leaving for work abroad. Should they be tied to the job for a certain amount of time before they can go?
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's nearly 10:30, so let's welcome Lee Anderson to the show. Now, the NHS chief, Amanda Pritchard, is talking about how the UK must train up more of its doctors. There is currently 133,000 vacancies, but how do we make sure we've got enough doctors in the UK, particularly in light of the exodus of the doctors that we've trained and paid for to places like Australia? Lee Anderson is on the line. I don't know if you heard the interview before, but it was about more money, more money, more money. But I'm wondering, we were talking about what can we do that doesn't require money, but could help keep doctors here in the country?
Well, I'll tell you what, Esther, good morning, Phil. Some of these people who are saying this in the NHS, if you offered them a bonus system where you say to them, I will pay you a tenner for every £100 you save, you'd see a big change in the NHS, because at the moment they are wasting hundreds of millions of pounds every single year. Look, we're all concerned about the NHS, of course we are. But I'm concerned about us keep throwing money at it when it's obviously a broken system. We need to completely overhaul the NHS and bring it into the 21st century, which we're not. We keep, throwing money at it is the easy option, when it's the whole structure of the NHS that has a big, big problem. I see it. My wife uses the NHS almost weekly, and I see the waste. We see the articles every single week on recruiting diversity officers and woke alphabets and stuff. It's time it was run like a business to give the public a much better service and value for money. But hey, I think there's far too many politicians in the place that we work at that's scared to have that conversation.
Lee, I was reading last night, Jeremy Hunt said in October 2016, this is a quote when he was Secretary of State for Health, training a doctor costs over £200,000, so in return we will ask all new doctors to work for the NHS for 4 years, just as army recruits are asked to after their training. And I thought, I can't recall this ever being brought in when a doctor's been trained up. He said this 6 years ago. It was gonna happen. Is it not? I mean, I agree with what Jeremy Hunt said back there. Do you, that if people are trained up, the taxpayers paid a lot of money for their training, surely we should keep them in the NHS? Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I'm sort of, I flip-flop on this a little bit, Phil. It's not a conservative thing to do to force somebody to stay in the country. But that said, I think there is a moral obligation here. If you're going to be born in this country and go through the system, go through nursery, go through school, go through sixth form, go through college, live in a society where everything's safe, you've got a good police force, you've got a good healthcare system. If you've done all that and, 27 years after being born, you become a GP or whatever, then I think there is a little bit of a moral obligation here saying, you know what, I owe my country a little bit. I'm going to give them something back. I think it was it Kennedy that says, think what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you. That's how I live my life, and I'm sure that's the same with you too. So you can't force people to do this, but I would hope that they would have a conscience and give back towards our society. It's a little bit different, I think, for nurses and people like that. They're not earning the same as GPs. They're earning a lot less. And I think probably we should be a little bit kinder to some of our NHS staff, our nurses, our paramedics, and especially with the student loans that they get. I think if they do a 5 or a 10-year stint in the NHS, we should give them that money back.
Well, could you not force them to do this? I mean, this is what Jeremy Hunt was talking about. And if the taxpayer's coughing up, you know, around £200,000, I did see Full Fact said that 165,000 was grants and 65,000 was in loans. But say it's £165,000. Surely you could say to a doctor, look, you've got to work for, Jeremy Hunt said, 4 years. If you want to go off and work in America or Australia or New Zealand or whatever, then if you want to pay back your training costs that we've paid for you, then fair enough, you can release yourself from it. But surely we could force them to do this, couldn't we?
Well, we could. We could. I'd like to think, though, Phil, that people have enough decency within, enough soul searching to actually think, you know what, this is a great country. We actually owe our country a debt, and for the doctors that came before us. But look, we can't be hypocrites on this, Phil, because we're quite happy to brain drain other countries.
Yeah, I think that.
Say, Esther, we're quite happy.
I got that. We're quite happy to bring. You're quite right. We are taking them from elsewhere, but with like nearly 7,000 doctors applying for a certificate to work abroad last year, with once they did a survey, 1 in 3 saying they want to go abroad, yet we need an extra 9,000. Isn't it just a simple way to say you've had $250,000 worth the training, stay in the UK for at least 5 years?
Yeah, no, it would be really simple, and I would love that to happen. But like I said before, you know, we're brain draining other countries. We're quite happy to take really well qualified people from countries that probably need doctors more than we do. Yet we've been a little bit hypocritical. So maybe in agreement with other countries, you know, you can't have one of our doctors for 5 years, and vice versa. Maybe that would be a way around it. But we can't be hypocrites on this.
Lee, just finally, the ambulance drivers have written an open letter saying that they feel utterly betrayed by the government in the way that they've been treated and demonised. What do you make about that and how ambulance workers have been treated by the government? Do you share that, or do you think that what they're saying is inaccurate?
Well, there's a distinction here, Phil, and you know this, between ambulance drivers and ambulance unions. You know, I've spent times a shift with ambulance drivers, and they, you know, sometimes they tell me a different story to what the unions are telling them. Look, there is big problems in the ambulance service. We had one particular case where one man had rung the ambulance service 200 times in a month, and they had to go out to him because he says the right things on the phone. And the ambulance staff, you know, they say to me, we shouldn't be going out to these people, but they have to. They're instructed to by their bosses. So it's like, you know, it's part of the NHS, and then there are structural problems within the ambulance service. It's about time we started listening to the ambulance drivers and the paramedics rather than the unions, who we know has got one single agenda, and that's to get rid of us.
Lee Anderson, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Thank you.
Right as ever. Fourth right as ever. Now, the government this week confirmed that they're carrying out a consultation into the compulsory labelling of halal and kosher meat at the point of sale. And joining us now to discuss this is Maksud Ahmed, OBE, who was a former faith advisor to the government. Maksud, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, the way I see this is that some people particularly want to buy halal and kosher meat. Some people particularly don't want to buy halal and kosher meat. So surely it's in everybody's interest that it's fully labelled so that everybody knows what they're buying. What do you think? Would you agree with that?
Good morning to you, Phil and Esther. I think, let me go back to my prison service experience. That prisoner was asking Maksud, put your hand on your heart and say, this is halal. So issue for me is a consumer choice, not a religious kind of debate we're talking about. So if the vegan is labeled and the vegetarian is labeled, and any other meat we're seeing on the shelf is saying it's a New Zealand lamb or is Botswana's beef. I personally think it's a consumer right that they should know if they want to buy halal or if they do not want to buy halal. Let me look at from the Muslim point of view. The Muslim beneficiary or the customer, she want to look at the traceability of that. Is that a cattle is coming? Where is it coming from? Has it been slaughtered according to the Islamic Zabiha, Islamic slaughter? And then the traceability and no cross-contamination. So I think it's just right at this juncture that we do that labeling, be it Asda or be it Tesco or be it at the local shop, where a customer goes and want to know where they come from.
So why do you think people have shied away from labelling this product?
I think, Esther, when I look at it, there are a number of cases in the recent past, where people have been selling turkey meat as a lamb because it's very easy and it's cheaper. So to me, if that's the intention that we need to tackle with the rogue traders and the rogue supplier, then I think it is important. It's high time that we go into the labeling. And I think some people will hide behind the, I call it religion. To me, that Islam, that's what I will, my expertise or my skills are from, is ever evolving. And is compatible with the current need. So in my view, when I look at the grassroots and views from the people at the butchers, they are asking exactly the same thing. We don't know where they come from. So if there is any cost implication for the trader, I think that need to be mitigated and that need to be dealt with. For me, I think that taking the consumer right, that they want to know if I'm buying a gluten-free, I need to look at the label, and exactly the same way with the halal meat.
Maksud Ahmed, OBE, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We very much appreciate your time. Thank you. I thought it was great what he said, don't you? I mean, I think, you know, that people want to know what they're buying.
And
what's wrong with labelling?
And people do on all kinds of things. So if you're intolerant to something, you need to know whether there's dairy in there, wheat in there. So you need to know that about how the animal has been slaughtered, because that's what people are concerned about.
I know. I think what people worry about is that they particularly do or don't want to buy it, and they go into a shop, they've got no idea. If you go into, you know, a takeaway, you don't know, go into Subway or something, you've no idea. You don't know whether or not it's halal meat or not, and I think people should have the right to know and be able to decide whether they want to buy that meat or not. What's wrong with consumer choice?
We want to hear from you.
We do. We want to hear what you think about that. Let us know. Send it in as normal, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
But coming up after the break, we'll be speaking to the MP for Penistone and Stockbridge, that's Miriam Cates, about the return of the online safety bill to the House of Commons next week and changes that a group of MPs are looking to get the government to do, and it could be a defeat for the government.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:40. We've had lots of you getting in touch this morning.
Yeah, I've got
Esther?
Ray here. People do not join the army to be some kind of resource pool for the NHS. The 6-point plan is a sticking plaster. We spoke to a doctor a little bit earlier on. To break the service down, cut overheads and totally reform each area, starting with the most expensive, get back to basics of service provision. That's what Ray had to say.
Graham says you could easily sort the staffing problems in the NHS, cap agency fees to NHS nurse pay, only allow consultant surgeons to work for the NHS and ban their private work, and tie in junior doctors to a fixed commitment and kick out all the unnecessary admin staff.
And David said, this is rubbish. The NHS is run by completely incompetent individuals. The NHS has to evolve. It needs to be run like a business. And I think this is what people are saying now. It's got 180 billion going in every year. How do we get it to work right?
And Maxine says, my 72-year-old friend was taken to hospital early yesterday morning in agony with a suspected gallbladder problem. He was left in a corridor for more than 10 hours and he was told he couldn't eat in case he needed surgery. He was still there at 2 a.m. The nurses and other staff were not rushing around helping people because there wasn't much they could do, I suppose, until beds were found. Thank you for that, Maxine. We hope your friend has a speedy recovery.
We'll keep those views coming into us now. The online safety bill returns to the House of Commons next week, and the government faces a potential defeat on an amendment tabled by Sir Bill Cash and Miriam Cates regarding making directors and senior managers criminally liable for what young people see online. Well, we're delighted to say that Miriam joins us now. So, Miriam, do you want to let us know what young people are being confronted with online, say, per month?
Well, it's a whole range of harms, isn't it? And I think we're coming to realise that the internet has changed the landscape of childhood. What children are able to view, the kind of content they're able to see in the privacy of their own bedrooms is just staggering compared to what we were exposed to as children. And of course, the internet has had many positives. I wouldn't be speaking to you now without the internet. But just like all advances in technology, it also comes with big risks and big potential harms. And I think it's becoming increasingly evident the extent of those harms. Of course, there are the high-profile cases like the tragic death of Molly Russell that have rightly caused public outrage, but it isn't just a handful of children that are falling victim to this. It is most children who go online every day. And so, you know, some kind of key stats, the NSPCC estimates around 3,500 online sex crimes against children are recorded by police every month. We know that around 50% of 11-year-olds have seen online pornography, most of which is violent and degrading. And I think society has recognised for some time, probably forever, that the kind of experiences you have in childhood affect the rest of your life. And that's why we have so many child protection laws. That's why we have, for example, the TV watershed, which seems very old-fashioned now. But we
Miriam, can we get to? We'll get to the amendment.
Yeah. So you're proposing, Miriam, that it shouldn't just be the company, the social media companies, that are liable for any material that young people see that they shouldn't. That the directors should be personally liable. Why do you think that change is needed in this particular area?
Because the change that needs to happen in these tech companies is pretty significant. The apps and the platforms need to become a lot safer for children by design. And we think that although fines are necessary, of course, when companies break the law, we don't think that will be enough to drive the kind of radical change that is needed in the tech boardrooms. And in other sectors, for example, the construction industry, the financial services industry, this idea is used of senior manager liability. So, for example, on a building site, if there's an accident and someone dies or is harmed, yes, the company can be taken to court, but also individual site managers can also be prosecuted if it can be proven that they have knowingly or negligently failed to keep the public safe. So it's the same principle that's already in our law, and we just believe that without that threat of personal liability, we just will not see the change that is necessary.
So you've got enough Conservative MPs to sign your amendment to potentially defeat the government next week if all the other political parties join with you. So what discussions have you been having with the other political parties, with the government, to try and get this amendment through? Or do the government genuinely face defeat next week?
Well, we know that Labour intend to support the amendment. They've supported similar amendments in the past. And as you said, I think we are now on about 48 Conservative MPs who are backing the amendment. But we're not doing this to inflict a defeat on the government. We want to win a victory for children. And so, of course, we are in discussions with the government. They do want to work with us. And we have had an approach quite late last night, so we haven't really had time to consider it yet, about what the government intends. So I'm leading on this with Sybil Cash. We'll be discussing that over the coming day. But yes, the government is keen to work with us. But we are very clear that there has to be this threat of personal criminal liability for directors in order to bring the change that we need. And it's happening in Ireland. They've instigated some
Miriam, just one point, and just a quick answer if you can. I see in the Times today that the former Attorney General, Sir Jeremy Wright, has said that actually he thinks the scope is too wide and that actually it won't really help and be effective because it's too wide, the scope, what you are looking to do. So what's your answer there?
Well, we've deliberately kept the scope of the amendment to child safety duties. So we're not trying to criminalise directors for the broader aims of the bill, no impact on free speech, on anything like that. It's very narrowly about the child safety duties. But it may be that in the House of Lords, we need to narrow down further which specific duties they are. That's perfectly reasonable. But it doesn't change the argument that we absolutely need this act of criminal liability to be prosecutable. That's what we need to get in the bill at this stage. And yes, of course, those details could be worked out in the Lords.
Kate, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Big issue as well, keeping children
absolutely.
Safe online. And many people would say we've never done enough for that. We've been behind the curve on everything.
I think it's next Tuesday. It's in the House of Commons, so people can keep an eye out to see what happens with that vote next week. It could be very, very interesting. Now, the campaign group Save the Parish has urged the Church of England to reverse its £100 million commitment of financial reparations after the publication of a report linking the church to chattel slavery. The chairman of Save the Parish, Reverend Marcus Walker, joins us now. Reverend Walker, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate it. What did you think? What were you feeling when you heard this announcement from the church commissioners and the Archbishop of Canterbury that they were going to commit £100 million of Church of England funds to these reparations? How did that make you feel?
Well, £100 million is a lot of money. For the last 20, 30 years, we keep hearing there is no money. No, that old line, there is no money left. Every time churches have closed, financiers have sighed and gone, there's no alternative, we don't have any money. As parishes are merged and merged and merged into greater and greater and greater numbers, and priests have mental collapses as they simply can't handle the sheer scope of the work that they're expected to do, the Church of England sighs and says that there isn't the money. And now suddenly, after all of these years of there is no money, they've found £100 million, sort of, you could say behind the back of the sofa to fund this. So you can imagine how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that this will discourage churchgoers from contributing to their weekly collection or joining in fundraising efforts for the church roof? I mean, because lots of people might understandably think to themselves, well, hold on a minute, if the Church of England's got £100 million for this, then it doesn't need my £3 per week, and it doesn't need my money for the church roof. Is that what you fear might be the consequence?
This is what I fear. The reality is that every parish is its own standalone charity. Most parishes don't get any money whatsoever from the national church. Most parishes, in fact, give a tribute, you could say, up to the diocese and up to the national church. We, in fact, fund the national church rather than the other way round. But a heck of a lot of people are going to be looking and thinking, I'm giving a lot of money to this church, and by which they mean their own little parish church, and this church, by which they mean the national church, is just splurging £100 million. They don't need my money. And that's going to hit parishes up and down the country, and it's going to be really bad.
Thanks. I can hear your cat there meowing upset.
Also protesting about this as well.
Chatting and want to join in.
Now, we saw the letter. Have you replied? Have you sent a formal reply to this letter?
So that's my letter to the Archbishop.
A reply to that
I haven't
letter.
seen a reply as yet from the Archbishop.
Have you had a reply on that letter?
Not yet, no. I'm sure that he'll get round to it. It's only been a few days.
And what I want to understand, well, how do the parishioners feel? I mean, who is it now the church is supporting and looking after?
Well, you've got parishioners across the country. You've got different types, different types of people in different types of areas. You've got rural, you've got urban. Perhaps some of the most growing communities are, of course, ethnic minority communities. The biggest question is, how is the church able to be there for them wherever they are in the country? There was a report last year that calculated the value of all of the voluntary work done by churches across the country, and it came to something staggering, like £55 billion worth of voluntary work. Now, if parishioners, wherever they are, suddenly find that their churches are closing, that their priests are being sacked, that there is no community there for them, they're the ones who are not being well served.
Reverend Marcus Walker, thank you very much indeed for joining us from the Save the Parish campaign. I very much hope that we'd love to hear from you when you do get a reply from the Church Commissioners and the Archbishop of Canterbury. We'd love to hear what that reply is, so please let us know, and we'd love to know what our viewers think about this. Do you think that the Church of England should be spending £100 million on reparations for the slave trade when, as Reverend Walker said there, the church doesn't seem to have enough money to keep vicars on in parishes and are having to cut back there? We'd love to hear what you think. GBviews at GBnews.
Justin Welby, where's his focus?
Absolutely.
And that's what we want to know. Anyway, why would anyone under the age of 45 vote Tory? The Conservative Party is facing electoral time bomb as support from millennials and Gen Z is increasingly hard to come by.
In order to win the next election, Rishi Sunak will need to get this giant electoral bloc on side. But how? Here to give his perspective is political commentator Adam Lim. Adam, thank you for coming in and joining us. So, why is it that young people don't vote Conservative, and what can the Conservative Party do to change that?
Well, you might want to cover your ears for this, Esther, but I don't think there is anything they can do before the next election. I think that ship has sailed, so to speak. It's going to take long, persistent action from the Conservative Party to show that this bloc, which has been neglected for so long, actually has any support behind it. I mean, one of the big features is housing prices, but it's not just housing prices. When you take a look at the places where young people are involved with right-wing politics, you look at the New York Young Republicans Club in America, you look at the JFVD in the Netherlands. The Conservative Party has an unofficial youth wing. There's a lot of small groups. They have about 1,000 members if you add them all up, whereas the JFVD has thousands upon thousands of members. This is a right-wing party with thousands upon thousands of young people willing to do things. And it works because they offer young people a serious identity. They take control of the energy of young people, their desire to participate in something bigger, their desire to change things, and they funnel it towards these kind of politics.
They'd probably say with the Conservative Party, it's an age-old problem. People don't vote Conservative or usually support it while they're young. It's only when they start paying the bills, earning the way, and maybe understand slightly more about finances and aren't as ideological as maybe a younger person. So do you think this is going to remain an eternal problem, or do you think there are key things that the Conservative Party isn't tapping into?
Well, I've got to completely disagree, to be honest. I mean, you take a look at what Margaret Thatcher said. She said that people become conservative because they understand the facts of life. But at the end of the day, you look at the continent, and people actually go from right-wing to left wing in places like the Netherlands. So there's not like the facts of life differ between country to country. What's happening is that the Conservative Party doesn't pitch itself to young people, it pitches itself to the elderly base. And you can see that with offering no income tax to the over 50s if they get it back into work. Look at a country like Hungary, for instance. If you are a mother under the age of 30, you pay no income tax. You had someone on here a while ago who pitched the idea of under the 25s paying no income tax. That's another thing that was taken from Hungary. In these countries, people grow up and they become right-wing and then they go left-wing. And that's what you want. You want a situation where young people, as they grow older, become left-wing.
No, you don't. You want them to stay where they are.
No, you don't, because the shift of society.
But, I mean, is it not the case that young people tend to be anti-establishment, and when a government's been in office for 13 years, as this one has, that it's inevitable that young people will be inclined to be anti the current establishment, just as that when Labour were in office for 13 years and we had the Iraq War, you saw lots of students protesting against the Labour Party and things like that back then. Is that just not what an anti-establishment
I
thing?
think youthful rebellion was an idea that cropped up in the 1960s, but it never really was anti-establishment in any true sense. I mean, these were all values which very quickly became commonplace. If you look at any truly anti-establishment values, they're very quickly crushed. Young people do not sponsor them. I mean, being against, for example, they call it the green agenda, but I mean, this is a very establishment view. It's the scientific consensus, so to speak, and it has huge sponsorship within the establishment globally, and young people go all for it.
What about indoctrination in schools and universities? Lots of people say to me, well, look, one of the reasons why young people are so left-wing is because they just get this rammed down their throats in schools, they get it rammed down their throats in universities. Do you think there's anything in that?
That's the Conservative Party's fault as well. I mean, the specific duties regulation of the Equalities Act says that public authorities, which schools and universities are a part, must make equality and diversity commitments. And that's a public authority. That came into effect in 2011. If you look at the documentation, Theresa May, I think she was Secretary of State at the time, her name's right on the bottom of that. There's been 12 years of Conservative government since then. They've never repealed the specific duties regulation.
And it was probably going on for tens of years before. So apart from taxation, which I think we all agree on, what other specific things do you think they should be looking at straight away?
Identity. It's a matter of identity with young people. If you look at the New York Young Republicans Club, you look at the JFED that I've mentioned, they have a strong focus on what it is to be a part of that community. And they try and change people's cultural views rather than their on issue-to-issue basis. Because if you change people's cultural outlook, then finally what happens is they look at everything differently, not just the one policy issue.
Adam Lim, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it for this hour, but coming up we'll be talking to Lord Monckton following the release of the government's net zero report yesterday. And we'll be speaking to a student who'll be affected by the planned mass strikes at universities, so don't go anywhere.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. This hour we'll be speaking to a student who will be affected by the planned mass strikes, with 70,000 university staff members set to walk out in February and March.
And the government's new net zero report came out yesterday. We'll speak to Lord Monckton about the practicalities of this report and how much it's going to cost each and every one of us.
Bit of good news, the economy grew in November. It was only 0.1%, but still
grew.
Still defying predictions. We'll be speaking to business expert Justin Urquhart-Stewart on how the pundits got that wrong.
But let us have your thoughts on what we're discussing this morning. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But first, before all that, here's the latest headlines with Ray.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has described the execution of a British-Iranian national in Iran as barbaric. Rishi Sunak said the killing of Ali Reza Akbari was a callous and cowardly act. Mr Akbari was sentenced to death on charges of spying for Britain. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has summoned the Iranian chargé d'affaires to make clear the government's disgust. A union representing ambulance workers has written to the Prime Minister saying they feel betrayed by attempts to paint them as uncaring. GMB, which represents more than 10,000 ambulance staff, told Rishi Sunak he was demonising them over strike action. Comes after Mr Sunak told the Commons that industrial action was terrifying the public. Tory MP Lee Anderson told Esther and Phil the letter may not reflect the views of the workers.
Well, there's a distinction here, Phil, and you know this, between ambulance drivers and ambulance unions. You know, I've spent times a shift with ambulance drivers, and they, you know, sometimes they tell me a different story to what the unions are telling them. It's about time we started listening to the ambulance drivers and the paramedics rather than the unions, who we know have got one single agenda, and that's to get rid of us.
We're staying with health, and nursing strikes have been paused in Scotland after talks between First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Royal College of Nursing. Negotiations will now continue next week with the aim of reaching a deal by the end of February. The Scottish Government is also pledging to match any NHS pay increase in England if it's higher. RCN General Secretary Pat Cullen credits pressure from nurses as being key to successful negotiations. Rishi Sunak is reportedly sending a squadron of tanks to help Ukraine take back territory lost to Russian forces. According to the Sun newspaper, the Prime Minister will tell President Zelensky today that the army will immediately supply four Challenger 2 battle tanks, with 8 more to follow. The decision makes the UK the first Western power to supply main battle tanks to the country. Plans to house 400 asylum seekers in a small village near Northampton have now been dropped by the Home Office. Residents had objected to using the 17th century Highgate House Hotel in Cretan, which has a population of just 520. Opposition to the plans had been led by Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris. James Hill is the chairman of Cretan Parish Council. He told us why residents were against the scheme.
We're a village of 520 people, and the prospect of 400 people coming to live here without occupation or activities to keep them occupied, without proper access to local services, we felt that was unsustainable for us as a community and also for the local area.
Ministers are set to review guidance given to landlords who rent out social housing following the death of a 2-year-old boy. Awab Ishak died in December 2020 after developing a respiratory condition caused by mould. Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, which owned the flat, had previously advised his parents to paint over the mould. Michael Gove says every landlord in the country needs to ensure that their tenants are housed in decent homes. Hormone replacement therapy could help prevent Alzheimer's disease in women, according to new research. The therapy helps control the symptoms of menopause and provides better memory and cognitive function for women who carry the Alzheimer's gene. Professor June Andrews is a dementia expert. She told us it's really too early to know how significant this could be.
All the research indicates that there's some kind of link there. There's not anything yet to say that taking HRT is really going to prevent dementia. If it was going to prevent dementia, that would be really important. But the thing is, there's a chance that it might be associated with a reduction. And when you consider that taking HRT does present some risks and it has some side effects, it wouldn't be worth taking it just solely to prevent dementia.
And finally, the government says single-use plastic plates, trays and cutlery will be banned in England from October in a bid to curb the impact of plastic on the environment. At the moment, England uses around 2.7 billion pieces of single-use cutlery per year, and only 10% is recycled. Repeated breaches of this new legislation could lead to retailers and food vendors facing criminal charges. Dr. Christian Dunn, a senior lecturer in natural sciences at Bangor University, told us why the ban is necessary.
Plastic doesn't break down, doesn't decompose, doesn't rot away. And what happens to it is it breaks up into smaller and smaller pieces of plastics, which then become microplastics or even nanoplastics. And now what we're seeing is those plastics are so small and they're being found everywhere. They're in the rain, they're in the air that we're breathing in, they're even in our blood.
You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Frey. We've had lots of people getting in touch today. Esther, what have you got?
David, on the story about whether doctors should be sort of tied to the NHS for a number of years, he said, yes, make them serve their first 5 years in a hospital before they're even allowed to go abroad. They came into the NHS to learn and help us, not to run away as soon as they've got their doctor's licence.
Diane says, divide the NHS into regions and privatise it. Add more beds, bring in nurses and doctors from other countries. Stop the practice of ambulance drivers staying with patients. Train healthcare assistants to take over when patients are brought into hospital. The NHS is highly diverse. We don't need diversity officers. Have 360-degree appraisals and sack incompetence.
So was this Dylan's 6-point plan on how to save the...
and we've also had lots of comments about the labelling of halal meat. Dee says, on the subject of halal meat, I'm fed up of constantly Googling different meat outlets, particularly takeaways, trying to find out which ones don't use halal meat. It's become very tiresome. Labelling the meat would be a good idea for everyone. Nicola says, I agree, all shops, businesses selling meat should be labelled. And Kenneth says, we're all fed up with halal meat simply because the abattoirs do not want the problem of having to rejig the processes involved in changing the chain line. Another example of the majority having to unfairly accept cruel imported slaughter practices by woke, PC and cowardly authorities. Keep those views coming in.
Now, to look through the papers this morning, we're joined again in the studio by London Assembly member Sean Bailey. So, go on, what's got you hot and bothered under the collar?
Well, let's see. I've been looking in the Times a story about absenteeism in school. So, of course, we've had the pandemic. But what's really important, a lot of children simply haven't come back. And absenteeism in school becomes really important because the last time we had this sort of, not quite this level, but serious numbers absent was in the 2000s. And it took about 5 years to repair that. So people are worrying that it'll take even more. And of course, what happens here is a lot of children are vulnerable. School is where they get fed. School is where people see that they're being looked after properly. So them not being in school is important. But there's another thing that links this to the legislation in Scotland. In Scotland are now changing the gender laws, and it's taking responsibility away from parents. And the idea that you can take responsibility away from parents is linked to this because schools who are going to find these children are being attacked by the parents, at least verbally. And it shows you that somewhere in this country we need to have a conversation about what it is to be a decent parent, where parents' responsibility lies, and where the government will intervene. Because currently, as a parent, it feels like we're being slightly sidelined and the government are taking over.
Well, as for the disappearance of kids from school, it is a big problem. And when I was working in the Department of Work and Pensions, you get to see the enormity of that number because they might have been missing in the system the full time, but they come to the doors of the benefits when they need it. So it's hundreds of thousands of children who aren't, where they've moved, the parents got divorced, they've never gone to school, and it's a hidden number. And that's a lot of people we need to support, Phil.
Now, I'm going to be controversial. Makes a change. Page 29 of the Daily Mirror, and it's in lots of papers today. It's about the man who raped and murdered a teenager 47 years ago. He'd been cleared of it the year after, but he's now been found guilty of that murder and rape. And he was basically convicted because of the DNA. and her body, the victim's body, Jackie, her body contained DNA 1 billion times more likely to belong to McGrory, the killer, than anyone else. And it made me think, I've long argued that I think everybody should be on the DNA database. And I once asked in Parliament how many crimes were unsolved where a DNA sample had been found at the crime scene, and it was literally hundreds of thousands. Rapes, murders, serious sexual offences, and all of these would be cleared up if everyone was on a DNA database. Now, people say, oh, well, it's about my civil liberties and whatever, but look, I think my freedoms are enhanced by having all of these dangerous people who are still out and about on the streets. If they were in prison off the streets, that's enhancing my freedoms as far as I can see. And the other thing is as well, I actually approached my local police force to ask them if I could have my DNA put on the database. And they said, I can't, because I wasn't a suspect in a crime. I wasn't allowed to do that. But I think, look, if a crime happened and I was nearby and the police therefore thought I might be the perpetrator of the crime, and I got brought in, questioned, my DNA taken at that point. If they could have just checked on the database at the time, they could have cleared me of the crime without interfering with my freedom. So I think this would help everybody.
There's been lots of debates on this over time, because you're quite right. People will say, what about my sort of liberties? What about my freedoms? But I wonder if this will come up again, a debate in the House, and people say, actually, we feel more reassured now by the data, by technology and its accuracy, and we wouldn't have a miscarriage of justice if you got it wrong. I'm wondering if things are moving, and they say hundreds of thousands of cases not solved. Why not?
There's two things I'd say. The principle in this country is innocent till proven guilty. And that means I shouldn't have to carry an ID card and I shouldn't have to provide my DNA. Now, your argument is very compelling, and I accept that, it's very compelling, but I think that for me is the start point. And the other thing as well, there's huge communities across this country who have no confidence in the police or the system.
But how are your freedoms impinged by your DNA database being held?
Because I have to give up a piece of myself that is particular to me, that I should own, at least morally, and it should be a choice. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm just arguing the other side of the case. I am convinced by your argument, but I'm arguing the other side of the case. But the important thing for me is there is huge swathes of the country who do not trust the authorities, who do not trust the government, and wouldn't want to give up that piece of themselves, and being forced to do so would confirm for them that the government is trying to take over their lives.
Maybe we could take it at birth from people, not...
I don't know, that's worse.
No.
That means they had no possibility to defend themselves.
And you're right, you've got to have trust in the state, trust in the body, and at the moment people will say our trust is eroding, not increasing. So it's not just the technological answer.
Well, I'd love to know our viewers think about
I tell you,
that.
controversy.
Have a good ding.
Here's what's controversial. I wonder if this is as well. I thought it was an interesting article today by Matthew Paris in The Times. And he said, I can't help feeling guilty about going private. And he's sort of talking about the dilemma of whether he should have private health insurance. Does this mean I'm jumping the queue, or does it mean actually I'm putting money into the system because I've got money and then it can help somebody who hasn't? And then he also said, I've never did it when I could have as an MP. I didn't join Bupa. However, he said, the only person in my family who has was my partner, who joined it as a young journalist because it was a perk for the paper he was working with. And believe it or not, it was The Guardian who was offering up a private health insurance, which sort of made me laugh. So I'm guessing, should people feel guilty? People are doing it for many reasons now. And I see the front page of the FT. It's also saying Google searches for private healthcare is going through the roof. People are doing. So is it practical? Is it actually altruistic, helping other people? Or do you feel guilty for going and getting private health insurance?
This reminds me about the conversation about private school, because a private school kid once said to me, but my parents paying for me to go to school means there's more for children who need the money to go to school. And you could say the same about private healthcare. You could say the same about any insurance. Some people have much more insurance than other people can afford. This would be a much easier choice if the NHS worked better. And the story you had on earlier about NHS doctors being bound to the NHS, I think shows how ridiculous the system is. If we as a country pay for your training, you absolutely should offer us a set amount of time back. And
hallelujah! Give us a hand up there, because I I agree.
And if that kind of thing existed, then going private would have much less moral effect and have much more practical effect.
Do you think that politicians? Do you think it's embarrassing for politicians if they admit that they use private healthcare? Do you think
No, as long as it isn't illegal. Why? It's the same as the politicians who crowed on for years about public school, private school. Turns out their kids are all in private school. I mean, I think Diane Abbott was very guilty of that.
Sean, thank you very much.
And stay with us.
Now, over 70,000 university staff at 150 universities will strike for 3 days later this month over pay, working conditions and pensions. The National Union of Students has backed the strikes, which will be the biggest ever to hit UK universities and could impact 2.5 million students.
Wow. Well, we're joined now by final-year university student Anna McGovern, who is studying English at Queen Mary University. So, what do you think of this strike action and how is it going to impact you?
So, it's happening over 18 days between February and March, and I think the effect on students will be catastrophic. Like, for me, I'm in my final year, I'm approaching graduation, and these are the crucial months. And with UCU, they're deliberately targeting the dates that will impact the students the most and will bring the most harm to them and their education. And I think that, especially with, you know, when I started university back in 2020, we've been disrupted by COVID, we've been disrupted by constant striking, and then you do question, when does it stop?
And have you spoken to any of your lecturers or tutors about this strike action and about the damage that it's going to do to your education?
Well, it's quite difficult because with many of them, with the setup of my university degree, we actually have like a couple of days in person a week. And in my first year, it was completely online. So actually trying to get hold of one of the members of staff was actually quite difficult in the first place. I recognise they work incredibly hard in their professions. However, with what they're asking for, I think is way too much. And I think the UCU, they do not represent the interests of the students. And I think no one actually cares how this will impact the students as well.
I mean, it does seem bizarre, doesn't it, that the NUS are supporting the strikes? I mean, I always thought that the NUS was supposed to be there to represent the interests of students rather than the lecturers and whatever. Are you surprised that they're supporting the strikes, or is this what you'd expect from the NUS?
I am not surprised at all. And we were actually having, yesterday night, on my course group chat, we were having a discussion about the strikes, and a couple of the students on there said, what about if we organised our own protest, standing up for students? And then that was met with such a barrage of abuse, saying, no, you have to join the lecturers at the picket line, that's how you support it. But I don't think that that's the practical way to go about this, because you're supporting a union that doesn't care and pretty much hates the students and wants to disrupt their education. So I don't think that's going to work.
I mean, it should have been stating the obvious, wasn't it? That they should have all been standing there united protecting the students. Will you be looking for a refund? You haven't had the service you should, paying a lot a year, what, 9,250?
Yeah.
And this is many years of disruption now.
And I think many students will be in the very same position. I mean, I'm in over £40,000 of debt for an education that I, quite frankly, have not received. And we've been asking the universities for a refund. And for my university, for example, that's something they haven't done. We haven't had any compensation for any of the lost hours of education that, due to the strikes or any of it. So I don't think that's something that's going to happen, but we will be asking for it.
Because the universities say, well, we can't afford it. But I mean, that's in many respects that's irrelevant, isn't it? I mean, if you book a holiday and the holiday company cancel it, they've got to give you a refund. They can't say, oh well, I'm sorry, it's going to cost us a lot of money, so we can't. I think students should be much more robust in demanding a refund from universities.
And equally, they've exacerbated the situation, making this strike action at a crucial time, which we're saying, I'll bring Sean in here, which we're saying with all the strike action now, the worst time to go on strike for the NHS is during the winter period, when we know it always has a difficult time. But this, for students, just before exams.
Let's be clear, that they have done this as a political gesture. They're trying to pile on the whole winter of discontent and all the rest of that. But I'm shocked at the student union. What they should be doing is representing their members. And the fact that they haven't done that shows two things. A, they're naive, and B, they're just doing it politically as well. If they can't represent their own members, what's their existence for?
Well, I actually thought their existence is just to train in being political agitators. So they're taking money or support off the students, but they're not. They're just looking at themselves.
Now, I just wondered, Anna, about this, because I've sort of thought about this thing about refunds and what students want from when they go to university. And some people say to me, well, look, all I want at the end of it is I just want a 2-1 or whatever it is. What I thought, that's what I've gone to university. I want to be such and such. To do that, I need a 2-1. I just want a 2-1. If I get a 2-1 at the end of it, I'm happy. So do you think that lots of students have that sort of transactional approach, that they go to university and think, I just want the qualification at the end of the day?
I think it's actually become the fact that it's not even a choice, because you go to university for an education that you're not receiving, and at the end of the day, you just get a piece of paper saying, congratulations, you got your 2-1, your first, or whatever grade that you receive. So I think that's what university's become. It's just become that piece of paper. And I think many students, they want to go to university because they want to learn about the particular subject or the course that they want to specialise in for later life. And some people, they actually take a really great interest in the subject that they've chosen. It's not necessarily just about the degree or the piece of paper, and it's a very expensive piece of paper as well at that.
I interviewed lots of people during the pandemic, students who weren't getting their lectures, and they'd protest or what have you then. Anyway, they didn't, because they did get the 2-1. And they said they thought they'd gone gentle on the marking to give everybody the grades, to make sure there was no sort of retaliation from the students. Do you think it will be easy marking for you guys? You will get the grades?
Well, actually, I think that when last year there was actually an assessment boycott, so we didn't even receive the marks in the first place. I think there was an assessment that I sat in May's time, and I didn't get the results until September. And for some students, that was catastrophic, because they didn't have enough of their marks back to actually progress to the next year or graduate. So I don't think it's necessarily about going soft or anything. It might not even happen at all.
Anna McGovern, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
And getting your 2-1.
Yeah, exactly. and also your future career. We wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
It's funny enough, I think I met some students who said we didn't complain because we feared there'd be reprisals and we wouldn't get the grade if we complained. So
it depended whether you were in first, second or third year. Third year and leaving, you might do.
Sean, thank you very much as well.
Absolutely. Coming up, the government's new net zero report came out yesterday, and we'll be speaking to Lord Monckton about the practicalities of this report and how much it's going to cost each and every one of us. So don't go anywhere.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update. We start the weekends with concerns over rainfall. We're going to end it with potential for frost, ice and perhaps even a little bit of snow. We've got low pressure dominating the weather at the moment. These weather fronts have brought some further heavy rain through the night, and we continue to have Met Office yellow warnings in place across western parts of England and Wales this morning. The potential for further flooding because of that heavy rain overnight that will only slowly ease this morning. Brighter skies for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but showers developing here, falling as snow on the hills to the north of the central belt. The rain is edging away from most of England and Wales, so it will be brightening up through the day today. Many places seeing some spells of afternoon sunshine, but it's also going to turn colder, quite mild this morning in the south, temperatures in double figures. By this afternoon, more typically 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, and dropping sharply this evening. The wind's picking up sharply this evening too for Northern Ireland, and there's more rain to come here, so we have a wind and rain yellow Met Office warning in place for Northern Ireland. Could cause some disruption. The showers across northern Scotland turning increasingly wintry, even down to lower levels, potentially turning icy here as well. It will be a colder start to what will be a colder day tomorrow. A mix of sun and showers, but I don't think there'll be too many showers across the Midlands, eastern England, central and southern Scotland. So many places here having a dry day. The showers for North Wales, northwest England will be fairly frequent with snow on the hills. Hit and miss showers scattered around elsewhere, but overall a drier but colder day to come on Sunday. Temperatures around or a little bit below average, and certainly a lot lower than they have been for most of this year so far. And it is only going to turn colder as we go into the new working week, with the likelihood of frost and ice returning and the possibility of some snow in places as well. There are plenty of Met Office weather warnings in place. Keep up to date.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 11:27. Lots and lots of views coming in about all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Esther?
We had a guest on talking about why people under the age of 45 aren't voting Tory, but Philip's written in, he said, it's not just younger voters who won't be voting Tory. I've been a Conservative all my life, and now in my 70s, I won't be voting Tory. And then Tracy came in and said, I'm under 45, and I won't be voting Labour. Labour means chaos to me, so all views, different voting
Lots
patterns.
of views as well about my suggestion that everyone should be on the DNA database to clear up all those hundreds of thousands of crimes. Mixed opinions, it's got to be said, I'll be honest, mixed opinions. Paul says, morning, I agree with Philip, we should all give a DNA sample. The only problem with this is that so many crimes would be solved, we wouldn't have enough prisons to put them all in.
See, solve one thing, create a problem elsewhere.
Derek says, though, Philip's view is very strong, but individual freedom and bodily autonomy trumps all. So I'm having a mixed reaction.
Like you did in the studio at the time with me and Sean.
Indeed.
So, look, here we go. The economy's unexpectedly grown in November, helped by a boost from the World Cup. Official figures show the economy expanded by 0.1%.
Hooray!
Helped by demand for services in the tech sector and in spite of households being squeezed by rising prices.
So is the recession predicted by economists not so inevitable after all? Here to tell us more is Justin Urquhart-Stewart.
Good morning.
Justin, should we be getting the bunting out now about the prospects of the UK
growth.
Economy?
It's growth. May not be much, but it's something. And particularly like a lot of us were saying, look, we may already be in a recession. Well, we're not. But also don't get worked up over the fact of a recession. It's a cycle. This is what happens. We delayed the last one because of the banking crisis. So actually we need to be in a position where the economy slows down and then picks up again and we start going into growth mode. Now is the time I'd want to see the government actually planning for growth. Remember some of those comments that our late lamented Prime Minister for only a few days, the concept of growth is absolutely right. The way she was going about it was absolutely wrong. that's where we now give ourselves a bit more confidence. There is some growth, OK, from the World Cup. It's tiny. This is just a rounding error.
So, I mean, half of me thinks that, you know, we've got big problems to come. We've got tax rises coming, which will presumably slow down the economy and all the rest of it. Maybe even more interest rate rises, I don't know, in the near future. But that's on one side. But on the other side, it seems that energy prices are coming down. I was reading about that in the papers today. Inflation is due to come down. Oil prices are coming down. So is it possible that because of those things, the things might not be as bad as we originally feared?
I just add one more as well. The Bank of England actually made a nice little pile out of buying all those gilts.
Exactly.
Funny, an extra billion coming in here, billion there. You might have some money after it all. No, what you were seeing is actually, I think this is quite predictable, is this slowdown. It's a global issue, apart from anything else. There's no obvious sign you're going to be heading for a depression. But what this does do is gives a little bit more confidence. And that's the magic word in any economy. Have some confidence to say, we're not doomed, damaged, but not doomed. And also focus on those areas where we are good at and we can see growth. You mentioned technology is one of the areas that have been influencing those growth figures. Quite right too, because we're still setting up small tech businesses, and this is not based in South East. This is all over the country. Some great examples we've seen up in Sheffield, and these are the businesses of the future, as long as we don't actually sell them all off.
And I think that confidence thing is key, and us not talking ourselves down, because reading the papers, you'll get some areas which there's growth, but it all seemed very sort of sensitive, the changes and the fluctuations. I did smile that pharmaceuticals weren't doing so well. I thought it must have been a bumper 2 years before and slightly not doing so well now. And I think, how do we talk up the country? How do we talk up what we're doing? And not, because every day it's like misery on the news.
There's some key elements, and I've always been annoyed, right, when we go back to the Cameron years. They would tell us what they were doing, but didn't measure it to say, look how much progress we've made. Because actually, during the austerity, and that was a bad word to use in the first place, but actually they made a huge difference in terms of actually the amount of the deficit. We actually ended up, if you take out the interest, positive at the end of it. But you wouldn't have heard that actually coming from any of the figures or any of the politicians at that stage. Give people some measurements, and which you know are going to be achievable. And Rich, you started doing some of that last week. And then you can turn around and say, look, we've done that bit. Maybe small, we've done that. So inflation is coming down. We can see that actually from the futures figures. So the fuel figures, again, generally positive as well. So yes, focus more on that, and then focus on the areas where Britain is actually good at, and this is the technology. Tell people how many companies we're setting up, where they're being set up, how many people are being employed in this, and then not just employed, but the effect on other areas. So actually, technology companies in Sheffield have much more impact than, say, in central London, because it'll have a broader effect.
And it encourages us all that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, now that the Prime Minister seems to have stabilised things, has he got scope now to cut taxes to try and really get the economy going? Or would we go back again to what happened when Liz Truss was Prime Minister?
He has got scope to cut taxes, and he's got more to the point also to actually come up with incentives for taxation, which doesn't actually cost the government anything. We have the Enterprise Investment Scheme, but it's quite small. You can actually make that into regional investment schemes. Encourage more money to be invested, not just in terms of private individuals, but also the pension companies and things like that. And also look at the individual pension regimes to be able to invest in the regions, in the companies which they know. They know the people running it, they know the company.
And I think maybe the free ports was the start of this. Very visible. Yep. You can see it. I'm going around the country, and this could bring investment in and give a boost to manufacturing. Yeah,
that's what you want to do. And bear in mind, we're still a significant manufacturer. When people sit there and say, we don't make anything anymore, actually we're probably the 9th largest manufacturer in the world.
See, most people wouldn't know that because we always we're talking down. I tell you, you know, you're a breath of fresh air. You've certainly put wind in my sails. You've made me feel a lot better. Look, things are much better than we should be. We're being led to believe.
Justin Urquhart-Stewart, thank you very much, as always, for joining us.
Now, coming up, Keir Starmer delivered a speech in Belfast yesterday saying the time to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol is now. We'll be joined by DUP Chief Whip Sammy Wilson a bit later. But first, here are your latest headlines with Ray.
(11). Here's the latest. The Prime Minister has described the execution of a British-Iranian national in Iran as barbaric. Rishi Sunak said the killing of Ali Reza Akbari was a callous and cowardly act. Mr Akbari was sentenced to death on charges of spying for Britain. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has summoned the Iranian chargé d'affaires to make clear the government's disgust. A union representing ambulance workers has written to the Prime Minister saying they feel betrayed by attempts to paint them as uncaring. GMB, which represents more than 10,000 ambulance staff, told Rishi Sunak he was demonising them over strike action. Comes after Mr Sunak told the Commons that industrial action was terrifying the public. Rishi Sunak is to send a squadron of British tanks to help Ukraine take back territory lost to Russian forces. Speaking with President Zelensky this morning, he pledged to supply Challenger 2 battle tanks alongside additional artillery systems. The decision makes the UK the first Western power to supply main battle tanks to the country. And plans to house 400 asylum seekers in a small village near Northampton have now been dropped by the Home Office. Residents had objected to using the 17th century Highgate House Hotel in Cretan, which has a population of just 520. James Hill is the chairman of Cretan Parish Council. He told us why residents objected.
We're a village of 520 people, and the prospect of 400 people coming to live here without occupation or activities to keep them occupied, without proper access to local services, we felt that was unsustainable for us as a community and also for the local area.
We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Esther and Phil will be back in a flash.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:39. So many of you have been getting in touch about all the subjects today, but I'll start with this one. and this is from Jeff, and he said, do we really need our general practitioners and some of our junior doctors and medics to have such lengthy training? Perhaps back in the 1950s, when they couldn't so easily, get that much training, they'd signpost the most complicated things to the consultants and get on with other things. And that's from a doctor himself looking at ways to sort of get people working and in the hospitals.
Lots of comments about my DNA thing. I'm still pushing this. I'm not easily deterred. Linda says, Philip, it's a good idea. Thank you, Linda. The trouble is a lot of people have things to hide. If you've nothing to hide, why not? It might sort out illegal immigration too. Nick says, though, I do not trust the government with my data, let alone my DNA. Imagine it getting into the wrong hands.
This is the big thing. You've got to trust the organisations and the government, etc., who you're handing this information over to, which is so personal to you. It's a little bit of you.
Richard, I'm going to end this a little bit on a positive, because Richard says, I'm totally against the Big Brother thing in general. However, this DNA idea would make everyone safer, as crimes would be solved quicker and therefore free up more time to solve more crimes. 100% zero downside, in my view. It's a no-brainer. So thank you, Richard, for your support.
See, Richard has total trust in the government and the authorities. So I think that's it. And we've got here Nick talking about the National Union for Students there and the strikes that are going on in the university. He said you can't argue for course fees refunds if they support university strikes. So I guess the NUS can't if it is supporting the strikes, but the students aren't.
And we've also actually had, I wanted to mention this because we've had lots of views about the vicar that we had, who was complaining about the Church of England for giving £100 million in reparations for the slave trade. Eric says, what woke nonsense has gripped the leaders of the Church of England? It was the church through men like John Newton who fought against the slave trade. Yeah. This is no more than preposterous virtue signalling. And Claire says, it's disgraceful what's going on. Reverend Walker was correct. So lots of people supporting Reverend Walker in his campaign to save the parishes and stop the Church of England spending £100 million on slave trade
when all of those churches have been told for so long, oh, we haven't got any money, whether it was for the roof or whether it was for certain things going on there. Oh, no, we've got none. And there you go. They've got £100 million to spend when they want to. Sean, with reference to your story on younger people not voting Conservatives, I think you'll find the main reason is that they're bombarded with all kinds of lefty propaganda in schools, as most teachers seem to be left-wing. And that's why people are put off being Conservative, because they're being indoctrinated.
And Pamela says, I love Sean Bailey and what he says. He should be on more often. If only he was the Mayor of London instead of the one we have. Lots of people might agree with Pamela.
Absolutely. Now, another campaign in Cottingham, East Yorkshire, to oppose the sale of former university halls of residence to the Home Office has also been successful.
GB News' Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has the story.
Residents in Cottingham successfully campaigned against former student halls of residence being used to house more than 1,000 asylum seekers. The University of Hull confirmed it won't be selling its 40-acre site in the area to the government. Louise Acaster was a big part of the campaign against the plans.
The reason a lot of people were perhaps afraid to speak out about it is for the fear that, there was branded racist or, swaying one way or another. And that wasn't it at all. It's literally, for a small community this size, it just couldn't cater for that many people. 1,100 people in a village this size. It just doesn't make sense.
Hundreds of villagers turned out in protest against the proposals, and many feel a sense of victory at the result.
There's 20,000 people in Cottingham, and they was going to put 1,100 single men in Cottingham. Ridiculous.
You feel safe, you can walk out. I don't think I'd feel safe if it was full of asylum seekers.
You just can't stick 1,000 people in and hope everything's going to stay the same.
With a doctor's surgery and the dentist and different things, we wouldn't be able to cope.
We're a village with finite resources and we're not a dumping ground for the Home Office.
Local leaders feel more should be done by the government so other areas like Cottingham don't face the same fate.
It's a scattergun approach which doesn't work because they're not looking at the sites before they're selecting them to see, is the infrastructure there? Can the locality take the impact? They're just saying, oh, there's a spare property there, we'll use that. And they've got to stop that. They've got to put a pause somewhere. Why don't they hire cruise ships that aren't being used?
And MP for the area, David Davis, says asylum seekers need to be stopped before they get to Britain.
The real answer is not to look for other places to put them. The real answer is to stop the flow. I mean, if it carries on growing as it has, we could be talking about 1,000 a week. That means finding a new lawns every week somewhere in the country. Well, that's not going to happen. It's really just a policy sticking plaster, this. The trouble was, from Cottingham's point of view, although it'd be a temporary sticking plaster for the government, it'd be a permanent issue for Cottingham.
Villagers have still decided that they'll gather together for a protest in Hull city centre to stand against future sites like this one being used in areas that they deem inappropriate to house asylum seekers. Anna Riley, GB News, Cottingham.
Thanks, Anna, there. So let's now take a look at the biggest stories from the world of sport and showbiz. And to do that, we are joined and delighted to be joined in the studio by Hayley Palmer and Aidan McGee. I don't know where to start. Where should I start? Go on, Aidan. Tell us the big sports stories.
Well, yeah, we're only about, 45 minutes away from the Manchester Derby today at Old Trafford. Really big game, this, because it has a bearing on the title race. Manchester City played against Southampton earlier in the week. They lost to the bottom side in the Premier League in the Carabao Cup. But I think we're back today. I think Erling Haaland's going to be back in the starting lineup. He scored 21 goals in 16 games this season. That's more than Chelsea have scored in the entire season in their entire squad. So
he lives up the road from me. I just thought.
What, Erling Haaland?
Yes.
Oh, whereabouts?
Oh, he's in Cheshire.
Yeah.
They're all in Cheshire.
I know they are.
I
was recently of that parish myself, so I know all about it. You know,
yeah, but he's
a sad loss to the area, I think.
He's unbelievable, isn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, he's unbelievable.
So if he gets 2 more goals today, for example, then he goes to the total that one was enough to win the Golden Boot in the previous 2 years. So he goes to 23 goals. That was enough to win the Golden Boot, and we've still got, 3.5 months left of the season. It's extraordinary. But since United lost 6-3 to City earlier in the season, they've lost 1 game in the last 18. So there's a gradual improvement. And I think this is probably the closest derby we've seen in maybe 8 years or so, 8, 9 years.
And, of course, tomorrow it's the North London derby.
Exactly.
Arsenal-Tottenham, massive game there.
It is. So, look, Arsenal will be hoping for a United win today. If City win, they go to Old Trafford, get a result where they've only lost once since about 2014, I think. If they go there and get a result, it puts real pressure on Arsenal to win tomorrow. And that's a fixture they don't do well in. Arsenal have only won 1 away game at Tottenham since 2007. So the odds are against them. And that's at 3 venues. That's at Wembley, the old White Hart Lane, the new White Hart Lane. So it's not a happy hunting ground for them. But they need to win. Simple as that.
Hayley, will you be watching the Manchester Derby today?
I won't.
But do you know what was the best news ever for Philip, who is a S Club 7 fan, a huge S Club 7 fan?
Well, a Rachel Stevens fan in particular.
Oh, OK. We'll have to get on
Who isn't a Rachel Stevens fan?
But go on, tell us the good story. Philip could hardly contain himself.
Yeah.
Philip, I did not know this about you. You've gone off in my
Fantastic. Thank you
estimation
so
that you
much.
love S Club.
Absolutely.
They are reuniting 25 years after their first single. I am personally living for this as well, because we all need a bit of reach for the stars, don't we? Don't stop moving. I know every dance routine. I know every lyric to every song.
25 years ago, seriously.
Yeah.
You're older than you think, Aidan.
I know, I'm certainly
I turned 45 recently. And, yeah, it's just great news because, for me personally, I love all the 90s stuff. I love all the 80s stuff. It's all making a comeback. And apparently Simon Fuller actually phoned every single member personally and asked them. And I know poor Jo O'Meara, she watches the show. She has had a very bad back, but she is getting better. So we're really thrilled and delighted. And we're all going to have to get tickets to go and see S Club 7, aren't we?
Yeah, well, count me in. Count me in for that, definitely. Are you?
No, I'm not necessarily an S Club 7 fan.
Come on, admit it.
So there's
no shame.
They're all right. I heard about Oasis this week, though. They're bringing out their own brand of soup. You get a roll with it.
Oh, God.
But there is news, isn't there, with Noel and his wife separated after 22 years.
Yes, it's on the front
very
page
sad.
of the papers,
Very, very sad news. And also sad news this week, Lisa Marie Presley dying. I saw you wrote about it in your column, Esther, and I was really, really heartbroken to read that, because 2 days ago I was watching the Golden Globes, and there she was with Austin Butler, who played Elvis in the film, giving him a hug. And I did actually see an interview, and she did look a little bit unstable. She asked her friend if she could hold on to him, and her speech was a little bit slurred. And I just thought it was such incredibly sad news because, I mean, as you know, she was married to Michael Jackson. She was married to Nicolas Cage. She was actually married 4 times. She leaves behind her children. I know one of them actually committed suicide in 2020, but she still has twin girls and another daughter. So
It says on the front page of the Mirror that she died of a broken heart, that she never recovered after the suicide of her 27-year-old son 2 years ago.
She blamed herself, I think, a lot for that. I mean, it is just tragic circumstances, and it seems the tragedy of Elvis carried on, didn't it, in their whole family. I hope it stops now. But yes, and a wonderful film, Elvis, and Butler was exceptional.
He paid that award.
He paid great tribute, didn't he, to both Lisa Marie and Priscilla Presley.
Yeah, I know they've got a really good relationship, but I mean, apparently she was complaining of stomach pains on the day, and then she was admitted to hospital, and yeah, it just like broke my heart to read it, really. And big Elvis fans, aren't we? So
talking of films, we went to see the Whitney Houston film, didn't we?
Did you like it?
Well, I'm being honest, right? I thought it lacked a little bit more story. I would have liked to have seen more story. There was more singing. So if you enjoy watching sort of Whitney, there were lots of songs, sort of more or less in the fullness, whereas I would have liked to have known a little bit more. So if I put it in I'd put Bohemian Rhapsody, definitely number 1, with Elvis right there. Okay. Those two. Well, then below that, I'd put Elton John, and then I think I'd put that one.
Oh, would you?
Yeah.
The Elvis one was interesting. You mentioned about the story, because you got the full story there. I learned loads of stuff about Elvis, about the agent, how the fact that he didn't perform outside.
Colonel Tom.
Outside of the USA. I didn't realise it's because his agent basically didn't have a passport, and he had his passport taken off him.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. That was a story that I started liking. You know, there's a little bit of music in it, wasn't there, as well?
But what a genius the agent was, because unbelievably he kept in America but was satelliting out, and he saw more people, like 1 billion people across the planet, by staying in America. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, it was.
So there you go. So that's in the pecking order.
Okay, maybe it's because I love Whitney's songs. I like to attempt those in the shower, so maybe that's why.
She didn't buy enough chocolates to eat it. That was the problem. That's what she was really unhappy about.
Brad Pitt?
Yes.
I was said yesterday on that I often get mistaken for. We had a Kate Middleton lookalike on the show yesterday. Yeah. And I was speculating that I'm often mistaken for Brad Pitt.
I mean, I have to say, when I first saw you,
who mistakes you for
nobody? Nobody.
Well, he actually chipped his tooth, Brad Pitt, but we're pleased to announce that he's had it fixed. He had it fixed for the Golden Globes. But I mean, I think he can get away with it because he is Brad Pitt. But we're all a little bit conscious, aren't we? Especially if it is your teeth. But I'm sure he had private healthcare and he got it sorted straight away. There he is, that gorgeous smile.
He's older than you, Brad Pitt.
Is he? You wouldn't know, would you? Just to be perfectly honest.
Well, no, not at all. I mean, you're the same. You look exactly the same. So.
Tennis next week?
Yeah, that's right. So Monday we got the Australian Open gets underway. We had all the furore last year about Novak Djokovic not being allowed entry into the Australia. It's his tournament. He's won 9 of them already. I think that if you look at it last year, I think he probably would have won that tournament. So by standing his ground, he really sacrificed that title. That would have put him one ahead in Grand Slams, ahead of Nadal, 2 ahead of Federer. But he goes there this year. He played an exhibition yesterday with Nick Kyrgios, who's a local favourite. He wasn't sure of the reception he would get, because some people in Australia would think, well, actually, you tried to flout our rules. I don't think that was the case. I think he went to Australia genuinely believing that he would get in, and obviously it didn't. But I think he's in good form. He won Wimbledon last summer, of course. His tails are up, and I think that he'll probably go on and win it this time. I really do.
I saw an obscure sporting story, actually. I bet I've got one here that you didn't see.
Go on.
I read it. No,
we're going to have a duel on obscure sports stories.
I read it in the Racing Post this week.
Was it to do with horse racing?
No, it wasn't. It was to do with football.
All right.
But it was a betting story about football. Apparently, there's an investigation going on into the FA Cup match between Oxford United and Arsenal over irregular betting patterns over one of the Oxford defenders getting a yellow card during the course of the match.
Right.
And apparently there was an unusual amount of money staked on a particular Oxford defender getting a yellow card, and lo and behold, he got a yellow card, and they're now running an investigation into those irregular betting patterns. But I'm sure nothing untoward happened. I'm sure it was all...
No, I'm sure it was all...
It's an interesting story, that, isn't
yeah,
it?
look,
It shows how closely they're watching things, monitoring the money going in and out and things happening.
Well,
it does show
they're reporting back to the FA. That's what it is, because the FA are the ones who launched the investigations.
Yes.
Alan Carr?
Yes, Alan Carr is replacing David Williams on the Britain's Got Talent panel, if you're thinking of auditioning. Now, I think it's because that Alan and Amanda Holden are very good friends. They're currently doing a TV show together, so I think that might have something to do with it. I thought it was going to be Stephen Mulhern. I really did. But that is the news. I know the producers were frantically trying to find a replacement. They have done, so, yeah, I believe...
How do you think he's going to... Do you think this is a positive move?
I think it is, but I think he's so jokey that I wonder if he can be at all serious. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's brilliant fun, but is it going to be a bit much? We don't know. We're going to have to tune in, I guess.
Is he going to give serious feedback? It's a good point, isn't it? I don't know. I can't see him being serious, to be honest.
His dad was a serious guy. I tell you, a serious football man.
Really?
Graham Carr, yeah. He's football manager in the lower leagues, and he was a scout recently for Man City and for Newcastle United, yes.
Yeah, I've always wanted Aidan in my pub quiz team.
Yeah,
he's absolutely...
But it is. I mean, even if you're a comedian... Showbiz is serious business. You've got to make sure that you're good enough. You've got to make sure you're out and about. You've got to make sure so I think he will be... You might see a different side of him.
We might do. I mean, his shows that he, when he has his guests come on, he's absolutely fantastic. Like, he's one of my favourite comedians. Yeah. It's just that it's a completely different role for him.
No, I think we could see a new side of him. Well, look, it's been fantastic as ever to have the inside scoops, the inside stories. Aidan, Hayley, see you both next week. But that is all from us this week. Thank you for watching. Up next is Alistair Stewart and friends, and we'll be back next Friday with all the latest news, all the latest political insights next Friday and Saturday. See you then.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update. We start the weekends with concerns over rainfall. We're going to end it with potential for frost, ice and perhaps even a little bit of snow. We've got low pressure dominating the weather at the moment. These weather fronts have brought some further heavy rain through the night, and we continue to have Met Office yellow warnings in place across western parts of England and Wales this morning. The potential for further flooding because of that heavy rain overnight that will only slowly ease this morning. Brighter skies for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but showers developing here, falling as snow on the hills to the north of the central belt. The rain is edging away from most of England and Wales, so it will be brightening up through the day today. Many places seeing some spells of afternoon sunshine, but it's also going to turn colder, quite mild this morning in the south, temperatures in double figures. By this afternoon, more typically 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, and dropping sharply this evening. The wind's picking up sharply this evening too for Northern Ireland, and there's more rain to come here, so we have a wind and rain yellow Met Office warning in place for Northern Ireland. Could cause some disruption. The showers across northern Scotland turning increasingly wintry, even down to lower levels, potentially turning icy here as well. It will be a colder start to what will be a colder day tomorrow. A mix of sun and showers, but I don't think there'll be too many showers across the Midlands, eastern England, central and southern Scotland, so many places here having a dry day. The showers for North Wales, northwest England will be fairly frequent with snow on the hills. Hit and miss showers scattered around elsewhere, but overall a drier but colder day to come on Sunday. Temperatures around or a little bit below average, and certainly a lot lower than they have been for most of this year so far. And it is only going to turn colder as we go into the new working week, with the likelihood of frost and ice returning and the possibility of some snow in places as well. There are plenty of Met Office weather warnings in place. Keep up to date.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland.